So good morning.
Morning.
Good to see everybody. I was recently thinking about a teaching that comes up in Buddhism quite often around change, the topic of change, and also permanence. So I wanted to touch on that this morning. Change can show up in a lot of different ways in our life. A lot of it can be pretty anxiety producing, uncertainty about work or state of affairs in the world, or things that are not quite as serious, kind of like the 70-degree day, 75-degree day, and then a couple of weeks later there's snow on the ground again. So change can happen, in all kinds of different ways. And in reflecting on this a bit, I was thinking about how change also shows up in ways that we actually like. There could be, something that we're anticipating, that we are kind of drawn to, just all kinds of different things, maybe things on the horizon. I remember coming across some research about what's called the optimism bias, and apparently, I didn't really know about this before, but apparently something like 80% of people overestimate their likelihood of positive effects. So it shows up in a lot of different ways. I was thinking, like, if you're walking through IKEA and you see that nice thing that you want, and you're thinking, I really want that, and you're not thinking, oh, that's going to be hard to build. It's like we have this optimism that's built in. Or I was thinking of Charlie Brown when has Lucy there holding the football for him, and he's thinking, this time I think she's actually going to hold it for me. And that doesn't seem to work out too well for him, does it? But so change, again, a lot of different ways that it can go in one direction or another direction. And philosophically, too, we kind of think about change, and I think we agree with it in many different ways. It's just kind of like we look at the world and we sort of consider how we think about the world, and it really is, I think, when we just think of it on the surface level like that, we agree, things are constantly changing, transforming, so we feel like, that's just the way it is. Like a tree is constantly morphing, the buds are coming up in the spring. So all this to say, what does that mean when we think about what permanence is? When we really consider, what does this notion of permanence mean in our life? When we probably kind of frame things up in terms of, things are constantly changing, the atoms are moving in, the different objects that we see. Science is showing us how things are completely fluid. So I was thinking, how does that really show up for us if philosophically we kind of don't agree that we think of things in terms of permanence? And one way I think it shows up with a bit more clarity is when we look at our preferences. So when a preference comes up, I think it's much easier to see how we'll delineate things in a very specific way. So if you think of something that you're drawn to, especially like a material object, something that you want to buy or procure, there isn't so much of a feeling of change there. It becomes much more specific in our mind. It can be, different people in our life. Things become difficult, and we identify maybe a certain problem with a certain person. And I think there we much more get the sense of, that person is that way. it's a very specific way of seeing something where we're not thinking of that in terms of change too much. So when we watch this leaning of mind that happens, then we can, I think, start to see that objectification in ways that, the object is pretty clear for us and static. And also in reflecting on this, when we have this leaning coming up, I think when it's becomes stronger, then that objectification becomes stronger too. So like if things become quite tense for us, or if we really want something, then that feeling of permanence is probably becoming even more clear. Katagiri Roshi, my teacher's teacher, said, the opportunity to experience real silence occurs when we have been driven into a corner and simply cannot move an inch. So the opportunity to experience real silence occurs when we've been driven into a corner and simply cannot move an inch. So here, with these things that come up in life where we have a strong inclination towards something, we can begin to see how permanence is actually playing a role in how we frame up the world, that this is actually happening. So it's the opportunity to really be clear-eyed about how this comes up for us. It's a very important part of Buddhist teaching. It actually doesn't, I don't know, in my recollection, it doesn't come up too often, which is kind of strange. You don't hear about emptiness and notions of permanence too much in Buddhism, just kind of across the board. So here we have a clear opportunity to see how permanence plays a role when we watch what's going on in our mind. And what it boils down to, essentially, is just not being fooled by whatever, however we're trying to frame up the world, whether it's, an idea of change or an idea of permanence. So this opportunity that Katagiri talks about to experience real silence comes out of just seeing what's happening for us. And human beings are pretty complicated. Our thinking is pretty amazing in different ways because in some sense we can actually we can use this framing up the world in terms of change and also framing it up in terms of permanence at the same time, even though they're basically contradictory. So we have this way of kind of jumping back and forth or sort of using them together. And no matter how we end up thinking of the world, whether we think of everything's changing, or we start to recognize, yes, them attributing permanence to certain things. Either way you approach this, satisfaction will never be found in those types of ways of framing up the world, no matter how we slice and dice it. I ran across a quote from Pema Chodron. She's in a different Buddhist lineage, but this quote here was pretty nice. I wanted to just put it out here for you. It's related. She said, we can never get our life to be just the way we want it to be once and for all. We can never get our life to be just the way we want it to be once and for all. So this is the suffering of change, which is part of dukkha. It's one of the suffering elements of dukkha, the suffering of change. Yeah, for some reason this quote just hit home in a way that will want to arrange things in different ways. And it seems like a very a quote that makes it clear how no matter how we do it, we can't just have it finally settle the way we want it. And the Buddha spoke about this as this shows up as dukkha, that we can't get this final arrangement that we've been looking for. We can't make it permanent. So Buddhism talks about permanence as well. This is basically just unsettledness. When we try to get something and have it hold still, naturally there'll be an unsettledness that goes right along with this. It just can't be just so for us, no matter how much we try to make it, a certain way. So it's normal for us to seek after different things. There's another quote here by Pema Chodron, because that was another aspect of this that came up for me, is like, why do we keep doing this if we don't find satisfaction with it by trying to rearrange things? And she says, things go well just often enough, we keep coming back to the false hope that we could keep it going a certain way. So it's sort of like, why would we keep pursuing something that never brings us true satisfaction? And sort of interesting statement here that they go just well enough for us to kind of keep going after them. So it's pretty natural and normal for us to do this. But all along, the only thing that we're missing is the basis of this is just thinking. That's all that's going on. If we're trying to arrange things in a certain way, if we think of life or the world being a certain way, this is all just simply thinking. So the practice is just to be very clear-eyed about thinking that's arising and ceasing, no matter what it is. So our sense of belief, or our sense of permanence, is also related to belief as well. So belief in change or permanence. So no matter how we may be thinking of the world showing up, whether we think everything's changed or we recognize that we are hanging on to permanence in some ways, it's related to belief. And I think this is another thing. It's almost similar to how we'll sort of say to ourselves, well, I kind of think everything is changing. I don't actually think of things as being permanent, but then when we look at those preferences, we can see that solidification happening. Same thing with belief. It's almost like we can tell ourselves that, well, I don't really believe anything too strongly. I sort of have an open mind about things. So then the question comes up for me is like, how do we kind of see this more directly? How do we recognize belief that's coming up in our life? And when we sit meditation, especially when we first come to this, it can be pretty obvious the amount of thinking that happens. And this isn't a bad thing at all, but it's an interesting thing to reflect on, that this is sort of a way of, it's kind of an evidence of belief. When we continue to go back to thinking, we can see that there's something compelling for us in that. So we can see a belief, kind of energy towards belief, in just the mere fact that we kind of come back to thinking. And I bring this up with, I want to bring it up in a gentle way, because I don't want to give the impression at all that thinking, or this, kind of thinking that can come up pretty often, is a bad thing at all. It's just a way, for us to, again, be clear-eyed on what is occurring for us, just to see thinking arise, and just to be honest about that right there, it's an indicator of belief that happens. And again, belief is not a bad thing. It's nothing to scold ourselves about, because even using thinking in a practical way, it's just like you have to sort of prioritize which different ideas you have. We'll prioritize scientific understanding, knowing the rigor that goes into that. So there'll be kind of a provisional use of belief that really makes the world operate in much better ways, when people can kind of trust reliable sources and so forth. But there's this part of us where we, a belief about maybe something that we desire, or we want things to go a certain way, we'll find this thinking coming up. And you can see it in meditation. It's sort of like, sometimes it's like the tape loop, or like a record that's like bouncing and repeating and repeating and repeating, and you're just like, okay, I need to take it easy on this, keep thinking of the same thing over and over. But I think that's a reason why we really try to keep things simple in meditation. So we always have this very good friend of ours in meditation, which is the breath. And we come back to the breath. And that's a way just to be right here. So the breath helps us come back. If thinking arises, we just come back to the breath. We're here. The breath reminds us of our good friend thinking that's happening. So we're not saying thinking is bad, or we want to change that at all. We're keeping things simple. And thinking has got a lot of different, it's described as monkey mind and a lot of different things. I was thinking can be pretty mischievous as well. Yeah, sort of like different figures. I was thinking of remember the figure Eddie Haskell from Leave It to Beaver? It's like, thinking could be like that too. I looked up a quote from him. I was trying to remember. This is a quote. And this is sort of a humorously duplicitous figure, if you don't know who Eddie Haskell is. He would go up to his friend Wally's mom. He would say, "Good afternoon, Mrs. Cleaver. I was just telling Wally you have the most delicious smelling kitchen in the whole neighborhood." And Wally's mom would say, "Thank you, Eddie." She knows Eddie is going to be causing some trouble in the background in the near future. So thinking can happen in many different ways for us. In that way, I think we can just sort of take it easy on ourselves and know that thinking is a humorous character in a way. We don't have to punish ourselves in any way. And also good to keep in mind that we can't actually stop belief. We can't stop thinking, which makes sense. Even if you could stop thinking or belief, if you just had some sort of switch that you could click off, I think we can recognize that there would still be conviction going on. If we could just somehow sit down in meditation or take a pill or something and stop thinking, that wouldn't solve this aspect of us being actually having a conviction in the thinking. And again, the reason why we're thinking is we think there's something to it. We think that it can actually bring something for us. So, in developing the talk today, it seemed to be kind of have a technical feel to it a little bit, looking at these components. So I always try to remind myself, why are we talking about change? Why are we talking about permanence? It can almost seem philosophical or just kind of maybe unrelated to our life somehow. But when you look at the Buddha's teachings, like the Four Noble Truths, basically any of the teachings, and why the Buddha set forth in teaching these things was to address the unsteadiness that can come up for us in life. So understanding how permanence, a sense of permanence comes up in many different ways, is actually just a very honest way to understand how this human experience shows up. I think of dukkha as sort of this vacillation, or this up-down, which when I heard that definition for the first time, it made sense, because I think a lot of the up-down we actually enjoy. So it kind of gives us a sense of why we like to go after different things, or how that craving can come up for us, because we're sort of drawn to the dynamics. We want to find that thing we want, and then life will throw us something that's in the opposite direction, and then we'll try to get out of that again. So there's this very normal up-down quality. But that's actually what the Buddha was thinking about when he developed these teachings. Because if we watch closely, we can see that there is a different way. I mean, we can enjoy the things in life, the different dynamics in life, but the Buddha was speaking about actually finding true peace, finding a settledness in life. And it's not to give up the dynamics in life, but to actually feel them more directly, and to know that we can live life free from this buffeting feeling that can come up for us. It's a way to act in the world that's perhaps healthier for the world as well. So as I was saying before, thinking and belief are not the problem. And when we look at practice, this is not about trying to get rid of belief or ideas of permanence or change or anything like that. It's to actually just pay attention to what's going on in our life. Kate and I are dog sitting right now, so we have 2 dogs in the house, and there's at times can be a little bit of commotion going on. And I think in dog sitting, what you often find is you kind of just need to watch over the dogs. It's not like you need to control things in a lot of cases, because they'll sense, basically what is appropriate and is not. I'm sure there's some pretty wild dogs out there too, where you need to intervene a little bit more. But I think it's the same thing with our thinking. It's not a matter of trying to get in there and control things or have it go a certain way. This is about paying attention. And this is something that practitioners through the ages have always kind of reminded. And it's good news for us that we don't need to try to get rid of anything. It's not a matter of trying to get rid of thinking or belief or ideas of permanence or change. We're not trying to run from anything. We're not trying to run from unsettledness or anything along those lines. Permanence is actually just fully understood by noticing in real time this kind of feeling of reaching out and trying to obtain. So that's all we have to do is in our daily life, whether it's sitting meditation or we're out and about, to notice this inclination of mind that goes on. And right there is to be honest with what's going on for us in terms of thinking and belief. So the key word there is real time. Just being here, totally, every moment. And again, not about trying to change or manipulate anything, but to really take care of our life. So this practice frees us from the burden of trying to expel anything from our life or make any, turn the gears trying to change anything. This opportunity to experience real silence, as Katagiri says, is just to do 100% what is right in front of us, to engage completely. Because in the end, experience itself, if we settle down a bit and we pay attention to how life is showing up, it doesn't actually exhibit anything that can be considered described as change or permanence. Experience is experience, that's it. So we can set aside these ideas or theories that we have about the world. We can actually see directly how this framing of the world, the sense of permanence, is arising in each moment, and to be really careful and cognizant of how that is coming up. So it's really just to see that in its immediacy when it arises. Not to philosophically kind of think about it too much, but just see that inclination. So it's a very simple feeling of wanting to go after something, and right there is just watching that is all we need to do. If that's all I have for today, I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments. Any comments on the weather? It's like Minnesota's the perfect state if you want to have change. Let's just wait 10 minutes, you'll have change coming around the corner. Hey, David.
I heard that a lot of lower middle class people are okay with tax cuts for the rich because they plan to be rich someday.
Okay, yeah. There's some optimism. Doesn't seem to be going in that direction necessarily, does it? Yeah, has anybody heard about that theory? It's when I first heard about it, I kind of think of people being cautious and I don't know, it struck me as sort of strange, but then I thought about experiences where and so especially when examples come up, but I can't think of too many, where there's this optimism bias. What was another one? I think it relates to safety too. So it's basically the reason why people fall down in the bathtub or the shower is because they think it's just going to be safe. I've done it so many times before, and they can't, it's hard for us to see that there could be something that it might go wrong. Which I'm sure has evolutionary benefits to be optimistic and do what you need to do to survive and everything. But it's good to have the silver lining too. Yeah, none of this is good or bad. Yeah, Kara, go ahead.
One thing that I always get caught up in a little bit is desire, and I kind of think it's the same kind of notion where instead of attaching so much to a desire, just watching what we're doing, because sometimes you can't live life without having desires, we have to eat and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think about it in the same way where it's just not getting caught up in it, or not getting caught up in whatever the desire that you have is. I really appreciated your talk, because I feel like it's not that it's a bad thing. You're right. It's not that you can't ever have a belief, or you can't ever think or anything like that. It's going to be there, but it's
Absolutely.
just not attaching to it. Thank you.
No, that's great. That's the subtlety of this. And it runs a little bit counter to, at least me, when I first came to practice. It's kind of like I hear about these different aspects, even if you just kind of see the Four Noble Truths for the first time, and you see that craving is basically what it allows dukkha to arise, or it is dukkha. And then our normal perspective for that is like, okay, I found the culprit, how do I eliminate that culprit? You know, it's just very normal for everybody, whether whether I was starting out just then or much later. It just seems to come in there like we want to problem solve, and you know, if I could just sweep that away. But in a sense, that's kind of another, if I could just arrange it a certain way, or sort of, in that I really appreciate the teachings, which are very gentle, where we're not trying to, we don't need to exert that energy of trying to get rid of things or anything. It's really much more, you'll hear the term parental mind come up, where it's just being there, you know, completely being there, being here, staying here. And in meditation, it's a very rare opportunity, because normally in our everyday life there's so many distractions that it's kind of hard to stay with the mind as thinking is arising and ceasing. But we can do it in everyday life too, and that's really all it is just to pay attention to the thinking that's arising and coming up and arising and ceasing, which is maybe a little bit frustrating too, because there's probably other techniques that can make us relaxed quicker. And Zen teaching, I think it's a little frustrating because that sort of quick fix isn't necessarily, you know, we don't hear it from the teachers, and then also the practice is a long range practice too. So those are great points. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, okay.
Question from Denny online.
All right, yeah, Denny, go ahead.
Morning, Jed. Would you say that the arising and ceasing, the this and that, the dependent arising, would you say that is samsara, like suffering itself, and just bring yourself back to now, kind of a constant now?
Yes, the dependent arising speaks of the conditional world. So dependent arising has many different components: ignorance, craving, and so forth. And this is a type of teaching that helps us see that in our usual way of understanding the world, these things come up, basically craving and ignorance and so forth. So there are quotes from the Buddha that say that this conditioned world is samsara. It's this up-down. So the world, and dependent arising is giving us an exceedingly subtle understanding of the relative world. So, not to go on too long here, but our usual view of the relative world is that things are just sort of independent on their own. They can kind of just be on their own. Dependent arising brings us much more sophisticated understanding of how the world shows up, which is conditional. And it's conditional in a way that, like, it's not like this thing affects this thing. The conditions spread out into an infinite field of conditions. So it's like pure conditions. But even so, this is still the Buddha speaking of how the relative world shows up. And if we're even caught in that, if we're caught in any idea, whether it's, you know, we can become caught in the idea of interdependence, or the idea of permanence or change or anything. the Buddha was ultimately speaking of unconditioned understanding. And this is the understanding of experience as experience. That we don't need to rely on any type of philosophy. So we can study dependent arising to understand this very subtle way of almost like helping us dissipate our ideas about the relative world, to see this pure conditionality. But even then, if we hang on to that, that'll still be confusion. So I can't remember how you kind of capped it off there, but something in the lines of just being here, that is really what the Buddha was, the main focus of what he was instructing. And of course, I mean, how else, if we're looking for what's true and real, how much more real can just this,
Direct
the
experience.
sunlight today, everything is beyond description. It's inexplicable. It's always here now. That's what the Buddha was pointing at. And that's where we find this settledness, this, trying to remember the words that Katagiri used there, the silence, right? Experiencing true silence. So hopefully, I don't know if I quite got to your question.
That was
there.
very helpful. It's just a reminder, I guess, like when I'm with my kids, for example, stop trying to think about what this experience is and just enjoy the experience,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
right. Thank you. That's a great reminder. We're just walking down the sidewalk, and then you hear a pebble kind of crunch under your foot. It's just like the entire universe is just right here in that moment. It's even the most mundane things. This whole picture just becomes complete, and what else could we be looking for? What more could we ask than hearing that bird tweeting and the sun shining? Yeah, Catherine.
Could you unpack the statements about, I might have been zoning out a little bit when you talked about backed into a corner with you can't even move an inch, and then unpack also taking care of our life. I don't know if those two things relate, but I'm always kind of a MacGyver, kind of a, born identity sort of resourceful sort of person. And I think the thing that backs us into a corner and we can't move an inch perhaps is death, or the impending death. We cannot solve that. But I'd like to hear what preceded that statement. I was kind of like, I don't know, looking out the window
Sure.
or something,
Yeah, it
which
was
is frequent with me. But and then also taking care of our life. What do you mean by that? What does that mean? Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, it was a little bit of a leap there, but I was talking about our sense of permanence, and it's hard to kind of see that or feel that we could have an investment in things actually being permanent. And it's a little bit easier maybe to see that when inclinations come up, like there's something that I really want, or I identify something that I really don't like, then the border around that thing can become much more clear to us. Like we can get a sense a little bit of, oh yeah, I can see how permanence is, the notion of permanence is coming up for us in this human situation. And then the stronger the situation is, I think, is even a clearer sense of objectifying something. Like I really want something, then that thing is the non-changing entity that I want, becomes, we can see that just a little more clearly. Or the thing that is very difficult, or death, the feeling of what that is. It can be very solidified when things become tense for us. And that's category would say these comments pretty commonly. I think I've heard it, seen it in books quite often, that it's when we're in these tough situations is really when practice starts. We can really see this part of the human experience that is the unsettledness, this investment in this and that, inside, outside, different scenarios. I'm thinking of those things causing me problems, you know, how we are making all kinds of, we're coming up with a lot of ideas basically of what's, you know, the problem for us. Not knowing that actually all we have to do to understand this true silence that Ketagiri is talking about is to look right here in our heart, you know, and to be honest and be caring for the thinking that is coming up. You know, it's basically just taking the time to really pay attention, because there's just so many different things in life that, you know, we're entertained by different things and distracted. It's very normal. But so the taking care of it is just being kind with ourselves and actually paying attention to what's going on right now. And it's not just about ourselves too, because at least for me, when I can slow down a little bit and see or catch myself, then maybe I'll solve a little bit of a problem where I was just about to cause another problem. You know, I'll like catch it a little bit sooner. So it's helpful too. I think it's something the world could probably need, and be helpful for the world in different ways.
Solving problems is an interesting thing because any solution to any problem that's there will come with its own set of upsides and downsides. So, you know, that feeds into the, 84th problem kind of thing. There will never, ever be a time where there is nothing that is vexing, niggling, a problem that looks like it needs to be solved. But trying to solve it will put another situation there that has a set of downsides too that you don't necessarily see. You just see the solution of the one thing.
Yeah.
And it's our, I need to go back into the story of the wheel out of true and all of that stuff. I mean, it never will get into true. And in my life, I just radical acceptance, that is the case. Anyway, thank you.
It's almost like the biggest problem of our problems is when we think that, to your point there, when we demand upon ourselves and others that the problem is solved, then the problems become very difficult for us, and then we try to solve them in probably unhealthy ways. Ironically, I'm not sure if it's ironic, but the flip side of that, in terms of Buddhist understanding, is when we can see the problem-solving mind, then it's almost we can take joy in the sense that this is almost always a multifaceted situation that we're in, because we're not like, I need it to be this solution. If there's like a loosening of that grasping, then maybe the criminal that we see, that we know about, then we'll kind of, if we're not grasping on a particular outcome for that, we'll see, okay, they had a very difficult upbringing. So that's like, how are you going to solve that problem? Just come up with a narrow thing and solve it, it's done, I don't want to think about it anymore. Or look at a picture which is going to continually expand in different ways. And the main point there is like responding in the moment. Not just locking the person up and just like, okay, I don't want to think about it, it's solved. The depth of human experience is just, us all working together, finding kindness, finding understanding, doing what we need to do to protect, in the case of, a criminal or something like that, taking the steps of incarceration and different things that maybe need to happen, but do so with kindness and an openness, and keep asking questions. So yeah, the problems change for us, I think, when we can settle down a little bit, and that is directly related to seeing the grasping mind face to face, and just being honest, and sincere in our practice, and that's really all it boils down to. So sorry for such a long-winded answer there, but thanks. Yeah, Peter.
Thanks, Jed. I've always found that the idea of impermanence is maybe one of the easier ideas to understand. You tell it to me, it's easy to grasp. You tell it to most people, they're like, yeah, I get it, everything's impermanent. But at the same time, we forget it over and over again. It's like every single day, we think it's going to be just like yesterday, and of course, things are different, and it's annoying or upsetting or...
It comes back to bite us on a regular basis.
What can you just have any comments on like why it's such a difficult thing for us to grasp or we understand it and we believe it, but in practice it's much more difficult. Do you have any comments there?
Yeah, maybe it's related to that Shodron quote about things go just well enough where we kind of don't really take those teachings seriously. Is maybe that's something that's related to, we're fairly prosperous in this country. Some people, it's not so much the case here, but I think for a large majority of us, we do have ways of sort of distracting ourselves and getting a sense of permanence doesn't rise up on the list too high for us for some reason. And, but I think there is a way to really connect with this if we can really see the depth of what the Buddha was saying and to understand that we can really do this. And it's, it's not only for us, but it's for the whole, for all beings, basically. That's what's involved here. So, I'm not sure if I'm quite answering the question there. It's kind of like a human question of the last tens of thousands of years. We've always had this sense that we can find peace through getting something. And I think it's somewhat related to what you're saying. So basically, throughout the history of humankind, we'd go out and do things in our life, and we'd be sort of rewarded for those. And then we kind of extrapolate that into the thinking mind, where if I think about something, then I'll find what I want. And then we sort of ignore teachings about impermanence. So we're actually in the pursuit of peace the whole time, but we're kind of off track there. We're looking for that way to make our situation just the way we want to, and we're not, we're diverting ourselves a little bit from the actual peace that we probably really truly are looking for. It's a good observation. It's sort of a humorous one too. It's like, oh boy, here I go again. I'm forgetting that things are connected with each other. I shouldn't laugh too much because it's a serious thing, the environmental aspects where, we would do well to pay more attention to that. Help ourselves, and it would help others too, and help the planet. Anything else at all? Okay, thank you.